USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Edge for Friday, March 17th, 2023. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Each week we handicap and prognosticate some games for the weekend. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa. Get your tickets at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. 3 conferences are in their semis tonight. Everybody will crown a champion tomorrow night. So we're going to look at the 3 semifinal leagues first and then get into the finals. Since we don't know who's going to be in the finals for those 3, we'll look at the finals for the other 3 after that. So, guys, we're going to start in an area right in your home territory, and that's Hockey East. Providence, which had a couple of good wins to get to this point, they're plus 175 versus BU at minus 215. The over-under on this one is 6.
A little bit of a Cinderella Providence, but they're certainly approaching this, I think, like they're playing with the house's money. If anybody that reads Mark Diver, one of the best writers out there in the game, he had some, Twitter comments that the team looked looser than it's looked in a long time this week at practice. I'm not surprised if Providence just goes in with some reckless abandon, plays a really good game, and comes out and gives BU everything they can handle. I don't want to say that a final against Lowell or Merrimack would be an easy game for BU. That's not a fair statement. But this might be BU's toughest game that they'll face in the tournament. Providence can be a headache for a lot of teams. They put a lot of shots on net, so your goaltender has to be ready and aware. They play pretty good defense. They did not, after the first period last Saturday, they did not allow a ton of great scoring opportunities to Northeastern. I think the over-under on this one at 6 might be a little high. I think they're counting on, the odds makers are counting on BU winning and exploding for some goals. But I think if Providence wins this game, this is going to be a 2-1, 3-1 type of game. If BU does win, then I could see 4-2, 5-2, 5-3, that type of a game where they finally get their chances that they're looking for. But I like Providence. Even at plus 175, it's not as strong of an underdog as I might have made them. I might have had them somewhere in the 200s and had BU maybe a minus 275, even as much as a minus 310. But I still like Providence at 175. This is a good value bet here on the Friars.
This is a great value bet, largely because Providence, and this comes back to what I've said before, which is it's very hard to beat a team multiple times across multiple weekends. And Providence has already been swept by BU. Those 2 games were very different games. I mean, you had a 6-4 and a 2-0 game. So I don't think it's a problem if BU goes out and it has to win a low-scoring game against Providence. The problem for me is that it's the 3rd time in 4 games that they're going to have to play against a team that is playing essentially with house money, like you said. So I think it's a great bet if you want to make Providence your bet, but at the same time, do I like them enough to beat a BU team that has been a little bit cruise control the last couple of months? They've been playing really well the last couple of weeks, but before that, they were so far ahead. The loss to Northeastern in the Bean Pot, the loss to BC in the Bean Pot, the sweeps against Merrimack. The sweep loss against Merrimack, I know they came away with a point in there. I didn't love what BU was doing, but, Providence turned it around. But an over-under a 6, I'm with you. If you think Providence is winning, take the under. If you think BU is winning, pressure the over. But still, a 4-2 game would only push. It wouldn't go over. 6 is going to be a hard number to hit.
Yeah, I feel like the Providence BU series, which is just a couple of weekends ago, was a different Providence team. They were banged up. They've gotten some bodies back, Riley Duran being the most important of those. But I just think that there's a different confidence to Providence right now. I don't love getting into the psychological of a team, the psyche of a team when I'm making my bets. But in this case, I kind of feel like Providence just has a little bit more confidence than they had. BU is still a wagon, though. But I always say that wagons eventually run off the tracks.
All right. So you guys think Providence, the way they're playing, the success they've had, their attitude, their momentum, that's a good value bet.
The value. I like, if I just had to pick this game, gun to my head just to pick it, I'd probably go with BU because they should win this game. But with the value that you're getting on Providence right now in terms of making a bet, I think the Friars have some sort of value there. You just never know. But I always think of that first game in any of these league tournaments, the early game on Friday night, no atmosphere in the building, small crowds. You've got to kind of generate your own energy. And sometimes that underdog, if they're playing loose and playing excited, they can be explosive. But then you go back to last Saturday and BU, here they're playing a Vermont team coming off a massive upset of Maine. And what does BU do? Boom, 3 quick goals. And I don't want to say the game was over because Vermont climbed back into that game a couple of times, but they seized control early. BU is powerful. They have a lot of the depth. They are probably the deepest team in the league, with both experience, older players that can do a lot, and some really good freshmen. Lane Hudson, Rookie of the Year in Hockey East.
The other half of the semifinals has UMass Lowell a +110 versus Merrimack a -140. The over-under is 5. UML had to go on the road to beat UConn last weekend. But also Lowell lost both ends of a home and home late in the season to Merrimack.
This one's interesting to me. It's a natural rivalry. These two schools. It goes back to Tom Lawler at Merrimack and Billy Riley at UMass Lowell back in the 70s and 80s. And I believe it was Billy Riley that gave the famous speech where he was explaining everything he hated about Merrimack. I think he finished it with I even hate their bleeping zip code. So that was Billy Riley and how much he detested Merrimack. I think that rivalry has gone away a little bit since then. But now they're going to play the latest they've ever played in a postseason in Hockey East in a semifinal. It's interesting. Lowell is one of those clamp down teams in the postseason. They did it against UConn. Scored 2 goals early and then just kind of, I don't want to say they went on cruise control. It was a very tough game. They still allowed 41 shots. Merrimack doesn't mind doing the same thing. Merrimack plays a really good defensive game, but can open it up if given the opportunity. So Lowell has to play their game to win this one. This is a tough pick. If I had to make a pick on this one, I'd probably actually be taking Merrimack. They feel like a little bit of a team of destiny, but I don't know why. You're not supposed to bet against Norm Bazin in the postseason. I think he's been in 8 out of the last 11 Hockey East championship games, if I have that right, or maybe it's 7 out of 10, but it's a lot. And this is the 9th time in I think 12 years that he's been to the Garden. Pretty good for UMass Lowell.
Well, and I'm going to take the other side of this and just talk about Merrimack's game against BC last week. And you got to give Lowell credit where credit's due. They went down to UConn and beat a UConn team that, unfortunately, I thought was, I've been trumpeting their horn all year. So that one hurt me personally. Hurts me personally with given how much I loved UConn. But Merrimack went out against BC, and BC came out in that game playing well. I wouldn't say playing great, but played well enough to keep it scoreless into overtime. And anytime you start getting into a game like that, it starts getting kind of strange just how it all has to break down. The missed opportunities on both sides, missed shots, missed everything. And someone's going to eventually block shots, all of that. For me, it boiled down to what did Merrimack do during the first 60 minutes before they got into overtime. And before they got into overtime, they had pretty much won the blue collar areas of the game. And they finished the game with 25 blocks. They finished the game with 36 shots. To me, that's a team that can play both ends in the postseason, play a hard-nosed type of game. And when you're talking about the postseason, you start talking about stuff that happens in that, that's a really big deal. So I'm going to go the other side. If gun to my head, I'd take Merrimack right now. And that comes after Merrimack, honestly, was bad at one point during January. I mean, that was a rough. I mean, I was sitting here saying they might not even make the postseason at this point. Like they or they're going to be on the road. This Merrimack team has completely lost all of its mojo and everything that made it Merrimack. And they went out, beat BU, and they went out, beat Lowell. And all of a sudden, this Merrimack team feels different, and they have their edge back. And that's why, I wouldn't be surprised to see Merrimack BU on Saturday or Merrimack Providence on Saturday. Lowell has the experience factor, but Merrimack's playing with a little bit different edge right now that I think is hard to discount.
Yeah, I talked to Scott Borick about that probably early February, and people will remember that they lost Josh Siako, one of their assistant coaches, right before the season. It was literally, I think he passed away on Monday. They played their first game on Friday. That's how close the timing was. And he said that they started their season not having a chance to really decompress about that, and they played unreal and went on a run. And then as soon as they got home for Christmas break, they had a little bit more time to think things over. They came back. They didn't feel like the same team. I think it was the BU weekend that really galvanized Merrimack. And since then, they've played some really good hockey. I believe they're unbeaten since then. Going back to that game on Saturday, I thought that at times Merrimack was the better team, especially early in that game. They were trying to put that game away early. BC had some really good goaltending early that kept them in that game. And then you're right, it came down to one shot. The good game-winning goals, a 5-hole squeaker. Oh, well, not exactly what you want in double overtime, but it's what you usually expect. A lot of ranked posts for both teams. So I'm sure that Merrimack feels happy to be here, but at the same time, I think they also think about unfinished business.
Don't worry. In 35 years, that puck's going to be an absolute laser beam. That rocket. It's not going to be a 5-hole. I don't care if we have YouTube. You hit that goal, it's a laser beam to your kids. Mick Messner's kids are going to think that he ripped it high slot one timer. Crowd goes nuts.
Yeah. It won't be Mick Messner anymore. It'll be Mark Messier.
yeah, exactly.
Well, let's turn to the ECAC, a couple of semifinals in Lake Placid, the Swan Song tournament for Commissioner Steve Hagwell, who's retiring after the season. Colgate, fresh off a road sweep at St. Lawrence, plus 275 versus Quinnipiac, who took care of Yale, minus 355. The over-under in this one is 5.
I also want to kind of go with value here. I know that you're supposed to take Quinnipiac. They're on a roll. But who was the last team that Quinnipiac lost to? Anybody? Oh, yeah, it was Colgate. 3-2 on the road. This one's a little different. You're in a neutral setting. But I still think at plus 275, I'm not throwing a ton of money on this one. I'd be, if I were betting this, I'd be throwing $20 to hope, hoping to make 70 something. But the reality is that Colgate has done it before. They played Quinnipiac tight twice, winning once. It's 2 3-2 games. Oh, the over-under just happens to be 5. Yeah, perfect. We get it. Maybe Quinnipiac just goes in and does what Rand Pecknall teams do, and they just come out and they score 3 goals in the first 4 minutes, and the game's over. That could happen. But if Colgate can withstand the first period and come out either ahead or tied, I like Colgate's chances.
There's something about this game that just feels different, and I don't quite know what it is. Now, don't get me wrong, ECAC this year, if you'd have asked me for 4 teams at the beginning of the year, this probably would have been the four of the 5 teams. The only team I think I would have probably taken besides Colgate would have been Clarkson. But Colgate, they were hanging around in 5th last year. They were hanging. It was always the bar is what I called them. They set the bar. The teams that were serious contenders were over them. The teams that weren't were under them. Colgate seems to have filled that last spot. And I know they weren't one of the top 4 teams this year, but they were one of those teams that you felt like could go out and beat anybody if everything gelled the right way. They've got a coach who can go head to head with Rand Pecknold. Don Vaughn's not going to get out coached. And in a 1-game series on neutral ice, geographically closer to Colgate, I don't know. This feels like one of those where something weird could happen up in Lake Placid. Like weird things happen in the ECAC playoffs sometimes, and this is one of them.
Sometimes too, Dan, I think that you want as a coach to lose a game before you get to this point. I mean, Quinnipiac is just on a streak right now. And I know Rand Pecknall would tell you, nope, I never want to lose a game. We want to win every game. But sometimes as a coach, we've heard, you and I live in Bruins country and we hear the sports radio folks saying, hey, it's good when they lose a couple. I don't think that Rand Pecknall would want to lose this game. But if you lose this game, it might lead to a national championship. You get a refocused team. Who knows? I don't think that is going through their heads right now. But it's happened before where Quinnipiac has been an absolute wagon, a train on a runaway track, and then they lose in Lake Placid. So let's see what happens here.
I will say this. I would like to credit that my wireless keyboard that I totally forgot was in the other room. My daughter just started smashing the keyboard on me as you were talking about Quinnipiac. So I have nothing to hear about Quinnipiac. So as far as I'm concerned, Colgate's going to win this game for all the reasons that I said. I don't need to hear any of that, apparently. There you go. She doesn't want you to know about Quinnipiac right now.
Wow. Well, you talk goaltenders, and obviously Yaniv Peretz, a Richter finalist, a Hobie finalist, .922 save percentage on the season, and Quinnipiac limits shots. But Colgate junior goaltender Carter Gylander coming into this weekend with a .915 save percentage. He has been very good this season.
So there's one thing about Quinnipiac goaltending that I come back to, and that is that a lot of the numbers that you're going to see are a product of the system. And that's not to denigrate Yaniv Peretz by any stretch of the imagination. He certainly belongs in the conversation as a Hobie finalist and as a Richter finalist. I mean, he is one of the best, if not the best goaltenders statistically in the country. But in terms of a goaltender going out, and if something goes wrong, stealing a performance over the years, part of the reason why Quinnipiac in their not 30-2 type seasons, but those teams lost some of those games was because the defensive system that was playing in front of the goaltender ran into problems. Michael Gardig ran into it a couple times. I'm trying to remember who the other one was. I had a front row seat for one of them when Brown beat Quinnipiac in the postseason one year. I don't remember who the goaltender was, but they have had goalies through the years who have always had good numbers. And part of that's a credit to the system. If the system doesn't hold up against Colgate for whatever reason, they're going to run into some trouble. Colgate, on the other hand, goes the opposite direction, which I feel like the goaltender is enhancing a system that, this is not something that if you're betting on Colgate, you really want to know, but this is a team that has good goaltending, and goaltending is helping a system that with another goalie might not have the same numbers.
See, now I want to take it back just to the two biggest stages we ever saw Quinnipiac on. The Frozen Four in 2013 in Pittsburgh, where they lost to Yale in the final. The Frozen Four in 2016, where they lost to North Dakota in the finals. Both of those two games, I think you can say that their defense got beat. And then that exposed maybe their goaltending a little bit. I don't think that Colgate has the ability of what Yale did in 13 and what North Dakota did in 16. What I do think, though, is that Colgate could keep a game close and get that bounce. That's what they need to do. I mean, you got to think those were two pretty. I know it was 4-0 against Yale. I want to say maybe 5-1 or 6-2 against North Dakota. They weren't close games. I don't think Colgate has that ability to blow away Quinnipiac and expose them. But what they could do is stay in the game, get the right bounce. That's how they have to win this game.
What about the over-under of 5?
Perfect. Great number. 3-2, 3-2 of the two matchups this year. They were both 3-2. I mean, how do you that might have been the easiest number for a bookmaker to set all year. I think it could pump over. I would not bet the under on this one, even though it might get there. I would not bump it. I'd probably stay away, and if I had to bet it, I'd probably go over, because you got to think that the Quinnipiac system that we just talked about is also that they can explode for goals, and they might just do that, and it could be 3-0 early, and then you trade a couple of goals here. You're at 5 empty netter, 6, maybe another empty netter, 7. So I'd stay away from it, though.
The other half of the semifinal, a great traditional rivalry. Cornell is -110 against Harvard at -120, almost a pick 'em, and the over-under is 6.
I mean, this for my purposes, this is a pick 'em. The overjuiced numbers these days that all these online sports books get, -115 being the middle number now. But I don't see a lot of difference between these two teams. I really don't. I think they're both playing well. They both got through things pretty well last weekend. This is a tough one for me to pick. I mean, I'd probably just lean Harvard. For no good reason other than the fact that they finished in second in the standings. I mean, honest to God, these are two teams that there's not a lot of difference between the two of them.
To go along with the smashing of the keyboard earlier, now I have a dead battery, so I'm running around over here. This is postseason Rubin at its finest, just sheer chaos. I will say this: I prefer Cornell in this matchup. I prefer Cornell for a number of reasons. I really like Harvard. Harvard is one of the best teams I feel in ECAC. I would actually put them on the ice against Quinnipiac. Obviously, they finished second, everything that goes along with it. I would absolutely put them up against Quinnipiac, though, on a single game. I know that when they played earlier this year, I believe Harvard lost. And the difference is that Cornell won. Cornell, to me, is the team that beat Quinnipiac 4-0. They're a team that can go out and beat Harvard. They're a team that can go out. They swept Clarkson. This is a team that isn't going to be on top of your team in the standings. They're going to be the third place team. But when you watch the way they play, they have that style that can go out and play any type of game and beat a team in any type of game. I feel that Harvard is a little bit more advanced. They won the title last year. Feel that Harvard has that capability, obviously, in terms of talent. But I feel like Cornell, what they give up in talent, they have that it factor. And when you're talking about a team that's, a slight, there is no edge. It's a pick 'em in this. I would say, bet wisely on this one because Cornell, I feel, might actually be the better team in a single game neutral ice.
The one thing I might say here is that Cornell has played their best hockey down the stretch.
Yes.
And I like that about a team heading into the semifinals when they really have played. Their second half's been fantastic.
And even in the losses that they had to Clarkson and St. Lawrence, there was a 1-goal game each time. And there were things that they could easily go out and correct, which they did the next week against Brown and Yale when they smoked both of them. Now, I understand Brown and Yale were road teams in the first round, but that to me is a non-fact. You take the games before those two losses, the 1-goal win over Colgate, they murder-balled Union. You drop 10 goals in a game, that's not by accident. But they won 1-goal games. And to me, when you get into the playoffs, a 1-goal game is going to be a lot different. And I feel like that's going to be an edge that they can lean on down the stretch.
Well, let's turn now to the NCHC 2 semifinals, 5th meeting this season between Colorado College and Denver. They're meeting on the 4th different ice sheet of the season because they had home, and plus in downtown Denver. Colorado College a +330, Denver -440 with an over and under of 5.
Well, I hope Chris Mayotte sends the checks in to us. I'm going to pick him just like I did against Western, say they're going to get crushed. I mean, they don't belong in this game. That's what I said against Western, and then they went out and swept them. I mean, but when you look at the numbers, come on, they don't. I mean, they've lost 4 times to Denver. They've played a couple of close games, especially the last one. Got to see some of that game where I think Denver had to come from behind, if I remember right. I don't know. I love the value +330. I just can't see Denver losing. They've been playing well. They find ways to win games. I just don't see it. I also maybe lean a little on the over. I know these guys have played some low scoring games, but these are the types of games that it might be 3-2 late, then you score an empty netter or maybe even let's say 3-1 late. You score an empty netter to go 4-1, you pull the goalie again, you score another empty netter 5-1, and it doesn't feel like a 5-1 game. We saw it happen in the Big Ten last weekend at the semis. So I just like Denver. I like the over. No value in Denver, though. If you're going to bet it, find a way to parlay it with something else because there's just no value in -440.
No, this is the one where you get the free bet on plus 330 and you sink it on there and say the heck with it. Just isn't that what they've been advertising for like the last like 3 weeks around these parts? Like if you bet X, you get Y. Yeah, just do that. Just use your free bet on Colorado College then. If you live in Massachusetts and you signed up for anything in the last week. No, I said Western Michigan was going to win the NCHC. Joke's on me. I don't really have a good pick here for that reason, because it's a single game. I take the over. I'm not. There's no good reason to bet Colorado College plus 330 unless, like I said, it's a free bet. There's no good reason to bet Denver unless you're copying it or combining it into a parlay and you're just using the odds. I would say the over under. I would smash the over on this and say I don't think this is going to be 5. I think this is going to be 6 or 7 goals easily. But I'm with you, Jimmy. I'm still smarting from last week when that overtime goal went in. This was like in my head when that goal went in early in overtime for Colorado College. There was a part of me that was like so happy, and at the same time realizing what I had said during the week was like, oh no, the jinx lived. Like I felt. Did I kill Western Michigan's season? I said they were going to win the conference. I think I did.
Well, it was funny to me, too. USCHO got a little flack because all 8 of us in the Edge column last Friday picked Western, and some CC fans said, well, it's clear they know nothing about college hockey because they all picked a team that was favored to demolish the opponent. I don't know how that works. But anyway, that's why they play the games. As we
deserved it. Listen, we lose the game. We deserve it. But just remember, we weren't wrong. It's just those 2 games. We deserve what we're going to take because you earned the right to give it to us. But I still stand by what we said. Yep.
And if they played 7 games, it might be a 5-win series for Western. But, as Pat Ferschweiler said after the game on Saturday, his team just was not getting scoring from their depth. And that's not going to happen all the time. But it did last weekend. North Dakota is plus 120 versus St. Cloud State at a minus 150. Not really surprising for North Dakota. That was a close matchup with Omaha, and things are starting to really turn around for the Fighting Hawks. St. Cloud, it took 3 games to get past Minnesota Duluth and end their streak of postseasons in the NCAA. 120 plus 120 to minus 150 with an over-under of 6.
If any of my jinxes are holding true, especially in the NCHC, North Dakota fans aren't going to be happy because I'm going to pick the Fighting Hawks. I like the way they're playing right now. They looked desperate when they got down last Sunday in Game 3. They found ways to battle back, and they did it in a big way and exploded. And when you can when you see teams that start putting together goals in spurts and change the total complexion of a game. I mean, you know that team is then hot, and that's what North Dakota is. St. Cloud State, I don't want to say that they're limping in here. They had to go in. They had to win a game last Sunday. They found a way to do it. And that's a credit to Brett Larson's team. But I have concerns about them right now. They could win this game easily. It might be a pretty high scoring game. I like the over here, but I just think that North Dakota is playing their best hockey. It's about time, I guess, is one of those things you'll say. Maybe they're not the North Dakota team that I think everybody loves to see, the wagon that we often see in North Dakota. But at the same time, I look at this team, they're playing well. I'd have a hard time picking against them right now.
And we said weeks ago, North Dakota could easily go out and win this league. Yep. And we said it. This is the reason why. This is not going to be a North Dakota team that produces 8 guys that get their name on the Stanley Cup one day. This is not. It doesn't feel that way, at least. But it is a North Dakota team that, if you're rooting for them out there and you're sitting in Grand Forks, you're looking at them, and this is a team that endears themselves to you for the way that they've rallied, for the way they're playing a very different style of hockey. They're not just going out and steamrolling teams the way that they used to for a whole season and then raise a title at the end. But isn't it nice to feel like you're the underdog for nobody believes in you, unless you're talking to Jimmy and me? You got that vibe to you right now. Like there's this is not a bet that you want to make and say, I don't want to bet against St. Cloud in this game. This the smart money says Denver or St. Cloud for the championship. But if you're a North Dakota fan right now and you get through St. Cloud and you go in to play Denver or Colorado College, don't you feel really good about the nobody believes in us card right now? Like, you're either getting Cinderella or you're getting Denver, who's the best team in the country, arguably. So nobody believes in North Dakota unless you're us. So throw something down on them.
Yeah, it's like a once in a lifetime opportunity for Hawks fans, right?
Yeah, this is it. This is the only time that North Dakota fans can sit back and say, nobody believes out of the 4 teams that are there. Colorado College, great story. Denver, St. Cloud, 2 of the best teams in the country. North Dakota is the one team that nobody is going to, that in the finals, you can really crash a good party here. Go and enjoy this moment. Crash the party.
And then be in Fargo for the NCAA tournament.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Oh boy, that would just start things up. That would start my motor.
That's already causing heartburn for the committee as they try to figure out where to put people. Well, we're going to take a break and come back and talk about the 3 finals that are set. USCHO Edge is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa. Get your tickets now at ncaa.com/mfrozen4.
All right, class, it's the NCAA Men's Frozen Four. Welcome to Fandom 101. Want to help your team rule the rink? Here's your assignment. Lesson 1, go big for every goal. 2, when you bring it, bring enough for the whole class. And 3, attendance is encouraged, but passion is mandatory. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Buy your tickets today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
We're back with USCHO Edge. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. 3 finals coming up on Saturday are set, and here they are in alphabetical order. First, the Atlantic Hockey Finals. Holy Cross, a +135 at Canisius, a -165. The over-under is 5.5. And in this league, the top 3 seeds were all ousted. Number 2, AIC, and number 3, Sacred Heart in the first round. And Holy Cross got past number 1 seed RIT. Holy Cross has got to be the story here. Their sophomore Liam McClinsky with 21 goals on the season, but 9 of them in the last 6 games in the playoffs. Jason Grandy faced 40, 41, and 26 shots last weekend, gave up 4 goals in 3 games, including a shutout. An .898 going into the weekend. He's at .953 last weekend. Meanwhile, Canisius has got great goaltending too. And Jacob Barcheski. This game is being played on Canisius's home ice in Buffalo. What do you do with this one? Boy, my hunch is that Holy Cross is the team with all the momentum.
My hunch too. But I want to say that we've all, and maybe not you, Ed, because you're so close to the league, but from a distance, I've kind of ignored Canisius, just a little bit. That Canisius Niagara series is a fantastic series, but it's so easy to get caught up in this number 7 seed coming in and upsetting the number 1 on the road. And RIT, let's face it, RIT was a real number 1. That was one of the better teams that Atlantic Hockey has produced, and Holy Cross found a way to go in. And I'm really, enamored with what Bill Riga's done in his first 2 seasons at Holy Cross. It's, I remember talking to him before a game last year that I broadcast out in Worcester, and he said, Jimmy, I just don't like losing. He's like, this isn't what I'm used to. And he had so many seasons of success at both Quinnipiac and coaching junior hockey, and it just didn't feel right to him. And I knew that program, it would either get turned around really quickly or he'd probably be, looking for something else. And he turned it around is what he did. And I just love the way that this team is playing right now. And I don't want to take anything away from Canisius because they had to battle to get past Niagara. And that's a really good, well-coached team there as well.
Well, we should not overlook one thing. Up until the last weekend of the season, Holy Cross was 4th in the seeds in the league, and it was Canisius that went to Worcester and swept them and moved them down to 7. So that's another wrinkle in this.
It's easy to forget that too. So they have a little bit of recent history. It won't take a lot of tape breakdown, not a lot of pregame scouting to do here for these coaches. this could be a heck of a final. But my only regret here is that there might not be enough fans there to watch it. Being up in Buffalo and Holy Cross probably can't travel a bunch of their fans up there, but this should be a great Atlantic Hockey Championship game.
Well, and just to throw one thing in here too for these two teams is that they both had similar trajectories, and I know a lot of Atlantic hockey teams kind of follow this trajectory where they start the season a little slower, and part of that's the non-conference schedule. But when you look at the way the season went for Canisius, they opened up. They were kind of in a tough spot. The loss to Army. They got blown out by RIT. I had an opportunity to see them at Bentley, and it wasn't particularly like I wasn't enamored with what I saw out of Canisius. And then in the second half of the year, what really started with the home and home with RIT, they started going on a tear, and they split out at Air Force, which is a tough place to play, split with Sacred Heart, who was a very good regular season team, swept Mercyhurst, swept Holy Cross, and then was gifted in overtime loss by Army to get to home ice in the first round of the postseason. So it was the right break for Canisius that felt a lot like the infamous Robert Morris championship when Robert Morris was in dead last to start the year and then went on a heater in the second half of the year and won the postseason tournament. Conversely, Holy Cross is basically the same team. They started the year. They were having a tough first half of the year and then come back after Thanksgiving, and it's the same idea. They get 4 wins against Air Force, finish up the year beating Bentley, beating RIT, beating Niagara. You get hot at the right time, and getting the right matchup for Holy Cross. I felt AIC was a very good matchup for them in a 3-game series, and the RIT series, you go to overtime twice, and it's a very different type of feel in the postseason going to overtime and in the 1-goal games where if your goaltender gets hot, they beat a wagon of an Atlantic hockey team. So 1 game, 6:00 start. This game is a toss-up. 2 teams that this is Atlantic hockey at its type of pinnacle, where you get the 4 seed and the 7 seed that advance, and anyone can win it. And they're both going to play similar styles built around goaltending and big physical players. So it's going to be a really fun game to watch.
Let's turn to the Big Ten. No surprise there, Michigan and Minnesota, clearly the favorites all year, especially Minnesota, which has probably the best forward line in college hockey this year, if not in several years. Michigan's a +140 at Minnesota -175. And I'm not surprised at the over-under at 6.
I would have put it at 7. Honestly. I mean, we had an NHL game last night. Or I'm sorry, on I guess it was a Tuesday night. I had an over-under of 7, the Edmonton game. And I would have no fear putting this at 7. 7.5. This game is going to be 11. I want a 6-5 final. I want this game put it on an IV into my veins. I want this all weekend. This is what we live for in college hockey, to see Michigan play Minnesota, last year's stable of a team against this year's workhorse of a team. I mean, these 2 teams are unbelievable over the last 2 seasons. They're great this year as well. I mean, Michigan's got value of +140. Minnesota's, I don't think, has as much value at -175, but good Lord, could you get a better final of all the 6 that we're going to get? I don't care who, maybe if you get Quinnipiac Harvard or Quinnipiac Cornell, that's fun. BU Lowell could be fun. Denver St. Cloud, fine. But this is the final that we've been waiting for. This could be, if it's separated outright, this could also be the national championship game. It might not be because of where the seeds fall. And I think that these guys might, if they get to a Frozen Four together, they might actually have to meet in a national semifinal, the way things are rolling right now. But man, I would love to see these teams play as they could play a best of 7 this weekend. I'd watch every game.
All due respect to Dave Quinn, winner of this game gets placed in the Pacific Division over the San Jose Sharks. There you go. I'm excited for this. And remember last week when I said about Michigan, right? I said about Michigan last week when I said, boy, you're not the best team in the Big Ten. You're not it doesn't matter how good you are. You haven't won. You have to beat Ohio State to justify it. I'm going to go back to that well, because now you're still not the best team in the Big Ten. Just you're going to have a lot more people believing in you. You go out and beat Minnesota, that sends a completely different message. And that's the difference in the odds. That's the difference in plus 140 for Michigan to minus 175. Over under of 6, as you mentioned, I'd put this at 7.5, and I'd still take the over. I think this is going to be a double-digit goal game, which means it's going to be 1-0 in overtime. But I said with 20 combined shots. But I said maybe a hole burned in the ice. I don't know. But I love this matchup. I love everything about it. I love these two teams. I love the two fan bases going at it. This is perfect. This is, realignment is still taking its share of pot shots from everybody. But this is exactly what it could have hoped for in a Big Ten championship. Minnesota, Michigan, those type of games. Michigan was CCHA, Minnesota was WCHA, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, this is what you had hoped for when these realigned, and I know that's going to be an unpopular statement, but two teams of this caliber duking it out for a conference championship, and then possibly again later in the national title is perfect.
Let's turn to the CCHA. Northern Michigan pulled off a big upset last weekend, 4-0 win, 44 shots stopped in a shutout at Michigan Tech. Tech is in no matter what. But both Northern Michigan at plus 190, NMU's got to win to get in the NCAA tournament. And Minnesota State needs to treat it like a must win, because half of the scenarios of postseason games have the Mavericks out. They can be anywhere from a 3rd seed in a regional to a 4th seed. Plus 190 for Northern Michigan, minus 235 for Minnesota State. Over under is 6. And I suppose there might be a prop bet on whether there's some weirdness at the end of the game based on last year.
Well, I'll tell you, it's hard to bet against Minnesota State at home in the postseason. They've been able to roll in recent years, in various leagues that use this, top seed host, and they've been the host and they've won games, and it just feels like it's a tradition there. But man, has Grant Patolny got this Northern Michigan team just playing. I want to go back to something I said earlier. Sometimes you need those losses to kind of recalibrate yourself. And February 11th, Northern Michigan lost a game against St. Thomas. It was the back end of a 2-game series on the road. They had won 3-0 on Friday. They lose on Saturday 4-2. And I want to say that probably woke his team up. They scored 17 goals the next weekend, 8 more the weekend after that, 9 more the weekend after that in the CCHA quarterfinals. Then a 4-0 shutout last weekend. This team's offense is rolling. And Minnesota State might be the right team to shut them down. Don't get me wrong. But this should be as scary an opponent as Minnesota State could face in this situation. I know that Minnesota State won back in January. They swept them on the road. They split way back in November. The win for Northern Michigan coming in overtime. But these two teams, they don't feel evenly matched, but I feel like when you put the way that Northern's playing right now with Minnesota State, that's looked human this year. Let's put it, let's call a spade. They have not looked like the same, machine that just rolled to the national title game and were, 20 minutes away from hoisting a trophy in Boston last year. This is not the same Minnesota State team. Could they have some sort of a chink in the armor? Maybe. Northern Michigan, I would take them at plus 190 right now.
Yeah, I don't love the odds here. I feel like the odds are tilted largely because it's Minnesota State, and it's Minnesota State at home, and it's Minnesota State at home in the CCHA. So I don't know why. I just don't feel like these are good odds for Minnesota State. I'd have put this maybe a little bit. I'd have put Northern Michigan maybe plus 120. I'll even give you plus 150 after it moves, or plus 140. I don't love plus 190 for Minnesota State with Northern Michigan. I love the odds for Michigan, I should say Northern Michigan. And largely because even that St. Thomas game, which was a 4-2 loss, was a 1-goal game with an empty netter that was tied after 2, and you were down 2-0 early or at one point in the second. I just didn't even feel like in that game, Northern Michigan, I think they shot themselves in the foot. I felt like the first start of that game, giving up the goal in the first period, and then for most of the second period, they didn't play particularly well. I mean, they played fine, but they should have won that game in my mind. And
they chased it too much.
They chased it way too much. And now they're in a game against a Minnesota State team where they haven't chased, and they've forced teams, they pounded teams over the last month. And I think considering the styles, it's going to wait a bit more for Northern Michigan. That said, it's on the road, which Minnesota State in Mankato, I mean, we got to see the Mankato fan base in Boston last year at the Frozen Four. We got to see the Mankato people in general. It's not a huge, you're not going to get the Ralph type crowd. The arena is just not that big. You're not going to get a Mariucci crowd, but that Mankato fan base is gonna turn out, and that building is going to be rocking. And for Minnesota State, that's still worth, in my mind, half a goal. So, especially in the postseason. So that said, maybe the odds are right. I just don't love them. I think there's a ton of value on Northern Michigan. I just don't like it from Minnesota State standpoint to be minus 235, and I love it for Northern Michigan to be plus 90. But at the same time, like I said, it's Minnesota State at home, so I'm kind of talking both sides of the coin here. I will say, I think this one could be under.
Oh, I see. I look at this and think it might go over. Just the way that the offense has been scoring of late for Northern. I think this one could go over.
I think this one's going to go under, and I think because Northern's defense and goaltending has been so good as of late, even though they did give up the 3 goals to Bemidji, and that obviously would have been over. And I think the Bowling Green, both games against Bowling Green to end the season would have been over. I like the under on 6, or it would have matched 6. I like this as a 4-1, 3-2 type game. I feel like that dance is a little close to 6, though. That dance is way too close.
So stay away. Damn
stay away. Stay away.
Unless you can guarantee this is 2-2 going to overtime, stay away.
Yeah, stay away from that over-under. As opposed to the over-under of 6 in the Big Ten, which is every free bet you have, put that on the over.
Well, there's one bet out there that I don't think is out there, and that is whether Alaska gets in or out. There's a futures bet on who makes it into the national championship. And with all these odds back and forth, you've got Alaska watching all these underdogs that we've talked about, hoping that all the favorites win. They're about 2/3 chance of getting in. If you were going to handicap this one, what kind of a bet, what kind of an odds would you put on this for our friends in Fairbanks?
I would put it at probably minus 130 that they will get in. And I'd go probably to the other side, probably plus 150 that they won't. That's where I'd probably have to land on that. And I know today's juice is probably a little different. It would be minus 135, plus 155, something like that. As pure numbers, they're actually closer to like 42% to get in. Weighted numbers where you take out some of the massive upsets that could happen in a tournament, then they're closer to 63, 67, somewhere in there. I like the weighted odds. They're still supposed to, somewhat predict who can win these games. I think they get in. I do. And I think they'll probably get in as a 14, to be honest with you. Maybe it's 15, but they'll be right around the bubble, but I still see them getting in. I don't know if I'm not sure. The one team that I really think could make hay and pull off the big upset this weekend is North Dakota. Maybe UMass Lowell, throw them in just because they have some tournament experience. But I think North Dakota is probably the team that I could see pulling off an upset. You probably need 2 to knock Alaska out, though. I
think there's going to need to be 2. I don't, because you got to remember, if North Dakota wins, then North Dakota probably moves itself inside. They're at 18 now. They'd move themselves in, wouldn't they?
No, they don't.
Okay, they don't. Never mind then.
No, I don't think they do. North Dakota would probably still be below Alaska. Merrimack, if Merrimack were to win, or even if Merrimack lost to Boston University, I think Merrimack gets in, but then they get in as the 15th. Alaska is the 14th. There'll be some dancing on Saturday night with a lot of the pairwise. There's 4,000, just a little over 4,000 scenarios left. This is a lot different than. Do you remember years past where everybody had a big tournament this weekend, including the Big Ten, which I think at one point was all 6 teams were alive starting on Thursday night. At that point, we had almost 1 million scenarios. Well, we only have 4,000 scenarios, so we've broken. I know Tim Bruley, our owner, has and mathematician genius, has broken down every single possible scenario. I don't have that spreadsheet up in front of me, but I do know it was actually I do have that up in front of me. It was around about 40%. For Alaska. It might even be exactly on the number. It's 40% straight number that Alaska will make it. Again, weighted, that goes into the 60s, 65, 67% area. But just straight, they're 40% to get in. There will be 60% of the scenarios of how games play out that they will miss it this weekend.
You know what's really funny in all this? North Dakota, UMass Lowell, and Providence College all have the opportunity with a slim number of chances, 64 scenarios for North Dakota, 32 each for Lowell and for Providence, of being as high as the 12th overall seed. It's just nuts. It'll all get really tight after Friday night, but wow. So I don't know. I'm passing along good vibes for the Alaska fans. I hope they make it, but I don't really have any skin in the game.
I'm just curious, just what they're going to do for the watcher on Saturday. Like, I want to know, are they going to get some food? I mean, you got to get together as a team, watch some things. Like, this is the important stuff. I know you get the whole thing with hockey is that we don't get the same selection show because we all know the teams that are going to be in, so you don't get the surprises. So, I mean, when you're watching the games on Saturday, I know it'll be stressful. They got to get, order some takeout. Get together as a team. I mean, these are important questions.
I don't know. I can remember Providence being on this bubble at one point. I remember Duluth and talking to coaches and players. I think Nate Lehman, the year that they were on the bubble, said he didn't even watch a single game and he went out to dinner with his wife. And then figured out when it was all over.
That sounds horrible.
I do remember him saying
that.
So. All right. Well, we've had an extended version here as we've looked at all the matchups. So with that, we're going to wrap things up. Enjoy the games this weekend. USCHO Edge is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa. Secure your seats at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Find our podcasts at uscho.com/podcasts or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Edge.